buffet, 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 yeah. Pillow talk buffet, 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 pillow talk buffet, 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 yeah. Pillow talk buffet, 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 pillow talk buffet, pillow talk buffet.
Bless you. Bless you. Yeah, quadruple sneezer back there. Quadruple sneezer.
That's an initiation into
Oh.
into spring.
Which gang? Okay,
It's
just say it.
It's called the
sneeze
pollen,
gang.
the pollineers in this piece. You got allergies to pollen? I do too. I be sneezing like 4 times. How about you?
Camera 2 is rolling.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
I'm fine, I promise.
Okay. So you want us to start?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Jessica,
Yes.
how's your week been?
Ooh, child. It's been interesting. And, yeah, interesting. What about you?
Yeah. I needed it to go by a little faster than it did, and now we got like 10 minutes of the weekend, so
Yeah.
let's go.
Right, because when you go to sleep tonight, it'll be Monday tomorrow.
Exactly. So I have a question for you. Are there any phrases or words that you hate or think are very overused?
Oh, yes. Per or period, which I often find myself using, but mostly when I'm overly excited. But I really can't stand it. Period.
Like period?
Yeah.
Like with the T at the
Yeah.
end?
Oh, with the T, it's very annoying.
Okay. Mine is yummy. When adult, if kids do it, fine. If my kid is like, yummy spaghetti, Mom, I'm like, yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
If an adult is like, man, this pizza was yummy, I'm like, how do we cancel yummy for a certain age group, like where it's not okay to say it anymore? Like you don't see 50-year-olds walking around saying biscotti, okay? So why are we still saying yummy? To me, it's not okay. Does it bother you, or do you say it?
I kind of say yummy. It's very yummy. Ooh, I probably shouldn't say it, huh?
I mean, I think I'm gonna get like a lot of hate for like, because I know a lot of adults that say it. I see a lot of
Really?
people that comment like, you'll see somebody that like posted their dinner on their paper plate with like
Ew, with corn, mashed potatoes, and like beige fried chicken. Like, where's your green?
not even fried. It's baked. It's not shake and bake. It's nothing. They just baked it. It's white still.
Ugh.
There's nothing on top.
Mm-mm.
Maybe some canned green beans and like Kraft macaroni on a paper plate, and they're like dinner. And then people comment in all caps, "Yummy!" exclamation point. It makes me so mad.
Okay, yummy.
Yummy is
I
my-
would try not to say
No,
yummy.
I don't. If you gotta say it, just say it. But I'm just. It doesn't bother anybody else. I don't think. I think it's a me thing.
What is it about yummy that is bothersome?
I think it's just that I can picture like a kid saying it every time they say it.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's like certain things that kids say
That adults
are
shouldn't say.
acceptable to me.
Okay, what's another overused phrase?
Another overused phrase. I think I'm over people talking about dieting. I feel like I'm pretty supportive of people wanting to be healthy and wanting to eat better and exercise. All those things are important. Like for me, I focus on them more like for a mental health standpoint now that I'm in my 30s. Before, went through a period of being a gym rat, and then I did not do anything for a very long time. I think that I don't want to know what everybody ate in a whole day.
Yeah. Oh.
Or what happened
all day.
Like, yeah, or like
Yeah.
their workout, like how many reps they did of anything. I just am not interested.
Yeah, I can see that because it for me it just makes me feel guilty, baby, because I didn't go to the gym. I don't want to know the last time I've been to the gym.
I burnt a lot of calories chewing. That's my calorie burn. Chewing. Not that I don't try, you know, it's just like I go through spurts where I'm like, this matters right now.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
by sweater body, it's sundress body time. I usually have a purpose.
And then, do you feel like when sundress body time is coming, like you're in a race, like woo, it happened faster than I thought, even though
Yes.
it comes at the same time every year.
Every year.
Yeah.
And I know as an adult woman that like you should work out all the time, right? Like
Mhm.
you should exercise, you should eat decent, you know. But I feel like I always know in the winter is like when it's time to get ready for
It's
summer.
serious.
And never. It comes to be April and I'm like, okay, rain, it's not snow anymore.
You know, this is not quite what we're talking about right now. Ooh, hey girl. But does anybody know where squirrels go in the winter?
I think they make tree nests. I think they do. I think they make tree nests. Where else do they go? They're not bears.
They don't hibernate.
I think they do. Well, no, I guess maybe you see them running around in the winter.
Yeah.
I've never stopped seeing squirrels
Did-
actually.
Me either.
No, they're
This question has plagued me for months.
so they don't hibernate.
I don't know.
But I think they have nests in trees. I really
Oh.
do. But I don't
Okay.
think they hibernate. I think they just like
So they
live
just hang
there.
out in the tree.
Yeah, until they go get like my garbage or my neighbor's garbage.
Okay. No, okay, I'm settled in that now. But I agree. Like, I walk back and forth to the bathroom at work. That's the extent of my exercise.
Okay, that's fair.
I dream of going to work out. I plan it every week. I don't go.
Do you ever feel like you got a good workout by thinking too much or worrying? Because
Yes.
sometimes I do.
Mhm.
My heart rate was up.
Baby, what?
My heart rate was up.
Between my
was
anxiety, I know I burn calories.
Exactly.
Anxiety.
Especially before bed. You know how many calories I burn before bed? Thinking about my grocery list all of a sudden. I haven't thought about it all week. My grocery list. I'm like, who did I wrong in 3rd grade? Who did I wrong? Remember that time in 6th grade where you were leaning on the back 2 pegs of your chair in middle school and you fell? Everybody saw it.
Oh my
Still
God, I
burns.
remember that. Mm-hmm.
Still burns. My heart rate's up. Just talking about it.
I have gone and sat in the grocery store parking lot and left. I sat in Randazzo's parking lot for 45 minutes. I made a list and I mentally prepared myself, and all I did was leave.
It probably took you a half hour to get into their parking lot to begin with, so that would get your heart rate up.
I just can't. So, whatever.
Yeah. I don't go grocery shopping.
Mm-hmm.
I do click list every single week, so I don't have to go inside of any store
Mm-hmm.
at all.
That makes sense, because when I go, like, I'm just not good at it. I don't know what I'm gonna do when I have a family. They're gonna be hungry.
You'll do click list like
Oh,
me,
okay.
where you can pick all week and add coupons and stuff. Are there any serious words that you think are overused or phrases?
Probably. Yeah, you go ahead.
So, something that like I had to Google recently. I think people use the term narcissist a lot in relationships, kind of as like a degrading term. And then I was like, what is a narcissist? I was trying to think about it, and I was like, oh, it's somebody who like can't have empathy, like they can't, like they can try and they can try, but that's actually a psychopath. A narcissist can actually learn. But I didn't know, so I felt ignorant because I didn't know the different terms. So I think that that's something that's overused, in relationships or when you're talking about a person, or even I think the term toxic is overused.
I absolutely think the word toxic is overused. And there's this person I follow on Instagram. I really can't think of their name right now, so sorry, person. But they talked about how sometimes the overuse of narcissism, the word narcissism, may not be that. It may just be like behavior issues because of lack of like conflict resolution or not knowing how to communicate, etc. So we'll plaster these names or these titles or these issues onto someone based on our experience because of good old social media or the culture, without really like evaluating someone's like emotional state. And I'd like to think that sometimes if a person has narcissistic tendencies, my lisp is out of control up in here, baby, talk about narcissism, but I think sometimes it's narcissism by brokenness. If I heal, maybe I won't appear to be so narcissistic. But maybe some of my coping mechanisms or survival tactics or things that I've learned to use to protect myself, quote unquote, appears to be narcissistic, but maybe I'm not really a narcissist. The first time I heard the term was a few years ago, and it was when I was dealing with this guy that I've been dealing with like off and on for 7 years, and he definitely has narcissistic tendencies, but I don't think he's a narcissist now that I look back. I think that he was a broken man who didn't know how to get his needs met for himself or from another, and so it was very selfish and self-induced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it felt that way and it appeared that way, and so when I discovered the term, I was like, oh, he's a narcissist. But now looking back a few years later, maybe not so much. Maybe some of those behavior patterns would have changed if he invested in his mental and emotional health.
Yeah, I think I've been quick in the past too to think that somebody's a narcissist because they maybe even like appeared to not be caring about what I was caring about. But I think like now that I'm older, I'm like, what did they have to care about that when I cared about that too?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that all of us, which is like something I've heard too, is that all of us have some, even with my own therapist, is that we all have narcissistic tendencies. It doesn't make us a full-blown narcissist.
Yeah.
But, you know, even for myself, like looking back, I think a lot of times I thought that somebody should at least like rise to like my level of being upset. Mm-hmm. Or to see where I was coming from, and because they couldn't, maybe I would think that they were a narcissist. Like, I don't remember using the word back in my 20s, but I remember thinking like, oh, well, they don't care about me if they can't see why I'm upset. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, am I overreacting? Mm-hmm. Because that's something that I'm working on with me.
Or maybe overreacting, yes, but maybe just a lack of like, of the ability to understand where another person may or may not be coming from. I had this thought even today. My relationship with myself isn't indicative of how our relationship with other people. So if I'm not compassionate with myself, if I'm not forgiving, if I'm not understanding, if I'm not willing to practice these things with me, it'd be super difficult to even do that with another person. I think it's already difficult because we live in our own minds and bodies, so we have to be intentional in saying, you know what, this person may not understand, or this person may not really get it, or this person may not whatever. But I think having a healthy relationship with ourselves makes a difference in our ability to take a step back and say, okay, wait a minute, maybe they're not now, well, let me finish the thought, maybe they're not being a jerk, or maybe they're not being non-caring or whatever. However, it doesn't mean that you have to tolerate certain things.
Oh, yeah. But
the ability to take a step back and say, let me look at it. I call it like not victimizing or villainizing people. I think in the past I probably villainized people a lot instead of saying, like you went through something too. You went through things too. How you handle it is how you handle it. Now, how you handle it, does it work for me?
Yeah.
Can our relationship with you, whether it's friendship, romantic, whatever, can our relationship with you that way? Mm-hmm. Probably not, but I don't have to make you a villain.
Yeah. Because
you don't operate or get it the way I get it.
Well, I think that from that is, I think a lot of times we have expectations that somebody's just like us. And that's something I've had to work through. I think we have assumptions that, well, I feel this way about this, and you expect somebody to operate the way society has told you that a relationship should be, or the examples in your life, like how your mom and dad were like, oh, well, this is how it's supposed to be, right?
Mhm.
So we should be operating this way. And having those expectations, and I think not even knowing about them is like really detrimental when you don't even know what your expectations are in a relationship. Because you already have them. You have the assumptions and you've set them, and a lot of times they're in your subconscious. You don't even realize that you're sitting there thinking that this is how it should be,
Yeah.
but somebody else that's craving something else is not thinking that they want those same things.
Yeah.
You know, they might not value seeing eye to eye on something. Like, that thing might not matter, but you're like, no, if we don't agree on this, how are we going to agree on anything else?
Setting really hard boundaries. Boundaries are healthy. I think too much of anything is not okay. I feel really smart saying that, but it's not new. I just had to say that. But hard boundaries are not beneficial either. Working toward being like empathetic or compassionate or understanding to why someone thinks the way they think or feel the way they feel, whether it's rooted in brokenness or in the process of healing, or they're like, this is it for me. Being able to take a step back and understand that, I think, is necessary in any type of relationship, work relationship, like I said, friendship, romantic. But again, I think a level of awareness of self is important. I cannot extend compassion and grace to even say, you know what, I respect what you think, but I don't agree.
Yeah.
I grew up in a household my mom was very critical. In hindsight, I think she was critical because she was critical of herself. She had these expectations or whatever. But in turn, that led us to be critical. And then I found that I was critical. Like, I had all these insecurities and fears, and how our way was the right way, especially growing up in a very Christian household, right?
Do you remember, like, what age you were when you started realizing that you were critical about yourself?
I'm going to say probably as early as second grade. I remember feelings of inferiority. I wasn't able to label it or identify it as that, but I compared myself heavily to my peers. Outside of, I don't know what I'm trying to say, beyond that, maybe, probably elementary school. And then at some point, that criticism of other people, I realized, like, it's because I'm critical of myself. Like, I have to take the light off of me and put it on someone else because of my own inner issues or whatever.
So, thinking about, like, other words and what you've just shared, like, about your upbringing and what it was like in your household, do you think that the word toxic is overused, or do you think that it's still important to look back on our own childhoods and reflecting and trying to figure out what these insecurities are and these areas of growth that we have? Do you think that word is still relevant?
I think toxic can be relevant within reason. If I become aware of my behavior or my actions or what I do, and I do nothing about it and still expect people to engage with me, then I'm toxic. Toxic behavior without any understanding of why I'm doing what I'm doing, or knowledge or verbiage to break the cycle, or to say, okay, this is what I need to do to stop this behavior or whatever. I don't think toxic should be used there, right? Like, so toxic has its place. I think everything has its place, but what we do after that, I think, determines the definition.
So for you, what would be an example of what real toxicity is to you? Like, can you think of a person or an experience in your life where you're like, this is what I would use to define what toxic is?
So recently, like super duper recent, there's a guy that I've known my whole life. We talked when we were like children, teenagers. I'm 35. I'm old enough to say children. And we reconnected last year. We shouldn't have, but we did, whatever. And over the course of the time we were involved, there were a lot of behaviors, but I really wanted it to work, not because I was so into him as much as I thought I was at that time, but just because at that point I was just ready for companionship and relationship. To long story short, we stopped talking for a period, and then we reconnected like earlier this year for like 2 weeks. We had a conversation. In that period, it was still a lot of the same things that I dealt with earlier in 21. So I had come to a point where I just wasn't willing to deal with things that were unpleasant, inconsistent, etc. And I made a lot of concessions for his behavior prior to that. So I ended up telling him, like, you know what, we're on two different wavelengths, we're on two different paths, and it's okay. I wanted to let him know, like, I don't want anything else. Like, it's fine. I wasn't mean about it. I did not villainize him. I did not make him awful. He was where he was. I was where I was, and it's okay. I'm just not willing to move forward. So I sent this voice note because I wanted him to hear my tone and not misinterpret my words. He called me back a couple of days later, and the conversation, like the first 5 minutes of the conversation, was very, like, it was great. Like, he sounded like he understood. He was like, I know you're ready for this, and blah, 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 blah. And then it turned. It, like, completely turned. And he went from understanding or appearing to understand into defense mode. And then he started to attack me. And to me, that was very toxic. Now, whether he had an understanding or emotional awareness of why he responded the way he responded, in my mind, I feel like I communicate pretty well, very thorough, and without attack, right? So I'm not like, you're this and you're that and you're this. I use a lot of I to keep the attack off of the other person. Like, I'm aware of where I am. But the conversation went left, and it went left fast. Do I think it was toxic? Absolutely. Do I think it was toxic because he doesn't live in a level of emotional maturity and awareness? Likely so. But we had several conversations of the same prior to. And to me, because I'm kind of still living in the ramifications of that conversation.
So was it toxic because of the emotional response that it set in you? Or was it toxic because he's the type of person that wouldn't be able to be on the same level of somebody who is emotionally mature?
I think it was toxic for the latter. And I even want to be careful in that because, again, I don't know how aware he is, but I do think at a certain point you have to take responsibility and do something about your own pain, your own fears, rejection, etc. And if you take what a person is saying to you clearly and you cannot digest it without attacking that person, then there's unrest internally. And it's kind of sick. Sick might be a harsh word, but it was hard. It was hard to hear, especially when I know, like, I tried to do everything to make sure I articulated myself well, and somehow I became the reason for his pain, even though I had nothing to do with it. And so at some point we do have to take responsibility for our brokenness because it affects how we deal with another person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
What are your thoughts?
For me, the strongest example I can give of what was toxic to me, I don't even think comes from like a romantic relationship. Me thinking back to family members is what's toxic to me. And for me, it was always trying to be around somebody or to repair a relationship for somebody who really only seemed to have the intention of removing joy from each person and from each situation that they were in, where it was impossible to feel anything positive around them. And I think for me, that's where toxic comes in, where there's just like no positive or joy to be found in having a relationship with someone. And it's hurtful, especially when you grew up having somebody in your life and they were a real kind of role model for you. And to lose that, and then to get to be an adult and to kind of have that ripped away suddenly because you saw a change in them, and then everything sort of clicked together, and then moving forward from there you notice it. Like I remember very clearly like having a moment with a certain family member where we got into this big argument, and I cried for days, like maybe a week. Like I remember talking to my grandma about it because she was, my person that I went to about everything, and just telling her how hurt I was, because I knew that was a huge moment where everything had changed for me. Somebody who had been a part of my life and a big part of my life. And I could never look at them the same, and I could never repair that relationship, because then going forward, I was very aware of their behavior. And I also like witnessed this person saying that they loved somebody so much, but then talking so harshly about them. Behind their backs or even in front of them, and then being in certain, family events where they were putting on a show, but then complaining about like how people didn't take enough appreciation, or how people didn't, make a big enough deal about what they had done. So for me, that was toxic, and it was a very hard decision to not have that person as big as a part of my life anymore as they had been. So I guess for me, like that was the differentiator for me. Like I've definitely had moments that I felt were toxic, and I think that toxicity has to do with like what your personal safety is. I think that there can be like universal like toxic behaviors, but I think a lot of it is like personal, of like what feels like poisons you to the point of where everything shifts. And
So
you
how
can't be the same?
So what I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm wrong, how the toxicity is representative of what you receive from this part. Like you kind of ingest it.
For me.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, like and that's just for me, for somebody, and obviously we're all going to define something differently, but for me it's that feeling of being injected with just negativity.
Ooh, I really like that definition, because I think that, I don't know if it's really a definition. I like the way you explain that and describe that, because I personally I struggle because I have this listening to you talk about this person, this family member that I've never met, the first thing I'm thinking is what happened to them to cause them to respond that way. So for me, creating boundaries has been huge. Not for the sake, because I think boundaries can be overused too, and they can be overused in word, and they can be overused in action, right? Because again, everything, I think there's a balance, and boundaries, I don't think need to stay in place all the time, right? In front, just say like in friendship, like in our friendship, I don't know, I'm just gonna use it as an example. Like we've been friends since we were 17 years old, so we've grown and experienced certain things, etc. And in our 20s, we had no idea what boundaries and all that crap were, like was or were. I don't know, child, whatever. So, but at that time, like we talked about, I think in our last episode, where like you were like really rough and I was really like passive. If I knew what boundaries were, and I operated in that level of assertiveness and awareness, I probably would have been like, okay, girl, it's a little harsh, but it was right boundary, but that
harsh boundary.
but 10 years, 12 years later, those boundaries don't have to stay in place, because there's growth. So like again, it goes back to me. Hold on, girl, I went too fast. So exercising like compassion, but not giving too much compassion too soon, right? Like people grow if they choose to. True. But being fluid in when and how we erect those boundaries and when we take them down. And I think that's it goes back to self, like a level of self-awareness. What do I need? What am I able to handle? What I'm able to handle today is not something I could have handled 10 years ago. but also not giving someone too much power and too much space in our personal lives, while still operating in compassion and understanding. Like, you're that way for a reason.
Yeah.
And I'm really sorry you are, but how you are cannot have a space in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to walk around bitter because of that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that your boundaries for certain people can change, especially if that person is working on their growth.
Mm-hmm.
If you, especially with this family member, I know a lot, and I had thought about that, like, okay, and I've done that with other family members too, like, okay, what's made them this way? And I'm empathetic, so I want to understand. I'm very inquisitive. I am too much sometimes, to the point where I'm asking, like, well, do you think, like, do you have any, relationship things with your mom and dad? Like, what was your childhood like? Because I want to understand that. And I think that, especially with the conversations that you and I have had, I think we've done that a lot together, where you've said, hey, your mom and dad's relationship was like this. Do you think that you're putting, that power or that assumption or what you've seen on something else unnecessarily? Or have you considered that maybe that affects how you're looking at something? And I think we've done that back and forth. But I think that if the person that you feel like is toxic isn't working on that, it's never going to change. Like, their growth matters to remove that boundary too.
Yeah.
If they're not working on not being poison in your life, or making you immediately feel unsafe, or like you're on guard, like, I don't like that feeling. I saw a TikTok recently, I might have sent it to you, where this guy talked about how in a relationship, or like with friends, family members, romantic, whatever, sometimes certain people can make you feel like you left the gas onto your stove. It, like, just that panic feeling. And to me, that's what toxicity is. Like, that's what feeling like someone is toxic to you is, like, that panic when you have to deal with them.
Yeah. That's kind of what the situation I brought up with that guy. It was a testament to my own growth, but the response, like, I remember getting off the phone after we hung up on each other like 3 times. Getting off the phone and having to sit in silence because I had to decide, right? Like, I'm no longer the person that, and I think what I was trying to say prior to, I kind of drifted off, is there was a part of me that wanted to fix a person and that wanted to overuse my own compassion to say, well, this happened to them. So in turn, it gave liberty or allowance for them to continue to treat me a certain way. And I'm like, I'm going to rally for you, and you are not rallying for yourself. So for me, I had to get to the point where I had to say, no, like, this is not going to, I don't have to deal with this. I don't have to. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier with awareness of self and your own healing and growth journey. In my own healing and growth journey, it has stopped me from allowing abuse. Right? Like, no, I'm no longer going to accept, like, this level of abuse. And no one's hit me upside my head before or anything. That sounded insensitive. Was that insensitive? Okay, I'm not trying to be insensitive. But, like, I've never been in a physical altercation. I've never been, like, sexually molested or anything like that. And I'm sorry to those who have. But, like, verbal and emotional abuse, because I'm gonna be the heroine, I'm gonna be the martyr for your life. But if someone does not want to show up for themselves, like, I can't show up for you, especially at my own expense.
Yeah.
And so after we got off the phone, I sat in silence and I had to make a decision and remind myself who I was today. And although it affected me emotionally, but it didn't affect me to the point where it, like, knocked me down and I'm like, oh, I need to call my therapist today. I just had to make a clear decision, like, this was unacceptable and this is not what I want to ingest. To go back to the way you describe toxicity, like, this is not, like, I can't ingest this.
Yeah.
I don't deserve this, and I'm worth more than this. And I'm sorry that this is where you are in your life, that you feel like you have to respond this way, but I am not responsible.
Yeah, that's not for me.
Yeah. Toodaloo.
Talk buffet. Buffet, buffet, yeah. Pillow talk buffet. Buffet, buffet.
buffet.